Hello, everyone, and we're back. It's a Friday evening, at least here on the left coast. That's a tie-in for what we're going to be talking about today. Hope people had a good week. It was another very bad week, but that's fine. I'm here, and I'm joined again by Elliott, and I'm drinking this beer because I have to share it. I couldn't not buy it. It's actually pretty tasty, but some dead Kennedys for you right there. And yeah, and we're going to be talking about speaking of Nazis, we're going to be talking about the left today. But specifically something that sort of popped up in one of Elliott and my sort of brainstorming sessions about how the left, political left, is essentially operates a lot like the cult of Cthulhu or some elder god cult.
Certainly this iteration of it,
Certainly
absolutely
this iteration.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess we will define all of we will define and refine all of these terms as we go. Probably autistically so, and that is fine. To be on the spectrum means that you got to use your powers for good. So you're going to get into the nitty gritty. And it's again not referencing. I know a lot of times in this channel I like to have us reference some big text or something like that. But this is I guess we're going to be generally referencing the works of H.P. Lovecraft. And we'll get it out of the way. H.P. Lovecraft was not a nice human being. He had completely dumb and a word that starts with R ideas about human genetics and how intelligence actually works. And I mean, so there's this, and everyone likes to make a big deal of that because, I mean, in some ways it is a big deal. You read Lovecraft now and you're like, wow, that's really racist. It also should be pointed out, though, that Lovecraft died relatively young, and towards the end of his very short life, really, had started to change his mind on some things. Now, that doesn't mean he got super, what we would call woke or anything like that, but he had started to change his opinions about things and then died. So it's not you take him for what you have to take both sides of Lovecraft. That being said, I still contend that you can disagree with somebody fundamentally and still enjoy reading them, or you can really hate that certain thinkers, writers do something and think they do other things well. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's just me. I feel like that's just having nuance in the world. People like to make fun of Lovecraft's writing style, like it's so over the top and like purple.
It's
and
like
blue.
Edgar Allan Poe, right? Like,
well, it's
cow.
like Poe, but like Poe from beyond. Like it's Poe on like ayahuasca or something. I actually really think that Lovecraft, I mean, in terms of his writing style, is actually a good writer. Maybe I'm weird. Maybe I am weird. And it makes sense because Lovecraft wrote in the weird genre, capital W. But I actually think he's actually a good writer. I don't agree at all with his take on human genetic diversity, and people who know Lovecraft know what I'm talking about. But
you read a couple, and the thing is,
the thing is this:
couple of snippets, right?
A very small fraction of his work is actually overtly super racist. Most of it is actually about like the unknowableness of the cosmos and the minuscule nature of humankind. And what had started to happen towards the end of his career was that he started to realize that it's not just like certain races of people. It's like every human is insignificant and is stupid, and he's a total nihilist. And I also am not I don't agree at all with Lovecraft's sort of ultimate view of humans. We are small and the universe is large and hugely uncaring about us. That's true. But I don't think the answer to that is Lovecraft's answer, which is just, well, whatever, live in ignorance, otherwise you'll go mad. That being said, I really enjoy reading his work, and I like that he takes you to the edge of like ontological despair and then asks the question, what are you going to do? Right? So like, here's the tentacled monstrosity that runs things. What are you going to do? And, anyone who's read any Lovecraft usually knows the answer is you die or you go insane, like, oh, I have seen the tentacle crawling chaos at the center of the universe. What do I do? Well, I either die, get squished, or just be like, I will, play my fiddle madly into the night. I've referenced several different Lovecraft stories right there in one sentence. So yeah, I feel like this channel's all about the humanities. And when you're going to study the humanities, it's all about nuance, right? No human is just one thing. And Lovecraft definitely wasn't just one thing. So that's sort of, I guess, my spiel there about Lovecraft. Also, it should be noted that Lovecraft was not writing about politics. Like he had political opinions, but he's not really a political writer, right? Like the affairs of humans were not interesting to him. The affairs of the elder gods were very interesting to him. So perhaps, this could perhaps be a strained metaphor, but I think metaphors, you can mix and match metaphors. I think I'm a fan of doing that. So yeah, today, anyhow, this is the long rambling intro into what we're doing today. We're using Lovecraft to talk about political ideology. And this is not the first time we've done this on the channel. People might remember the episode I did, a couple months ago now, with Marshall about political cosmicism and Nyarlathotep. And so we're kind of continuing in that vein here. Anyhow, that's my intro. That's my spiel. Elliott, since you were the one who kind of sort of brought this up initially, I'm going to pass the talking stick, if I may, to you. And so, yes.
The talking figurine, if you will, the little.
Yes. Yes. So I guess I'll ask the question. I'll do a Tucker. So the left is kind of like the cult of Cthulhu. Why is that? Tucker.
No. Well,
Yeah.
It's interesting, right? Because I went through several years ago this kind of, because I am one of the people who is like, it's funny that you say that this channel is a humanities channel, right? Because in some ways I'm anti-humanities, right? Of course, not in every way, obviously, because I do love some culture and whatever the heck, but I generally dislike pop culture. And one of the unfortunate things is that a lot of really brilliant culture has reached pop culture status and been ruined by Rick and Morty nerds, essentially, within the whatever genre they are, right? So Cthulhu, he has some compelling iconography that everybody appreciates, but I was like, how good is the writing really? Because, there's my fellow comic book nerds, and well, I wasn't really a comic book nerd, you see what I mean? I was a math nerd, right? So I was
there's a multiverse of nerds, and I think it's safe to say that, Elliott, you and I are both nerds, but of entirely, perhaps even diametrically opposed character alignments, which I will say is actually it's a benefit to the channel, because I don't want to have people who agree with me. I want to have other perspectives. So, but yeah, you're definitely a math person. You're a math nerd. I'm definitely like the language, history, philosophy, that kind of more of a guy. Not to say that math doesn't ever cross over. It does oftentimes, particularly
absolutely.
in philosophy. But yes, you and I have very different skill points set into very different skills, let's say. So
right, and we're from totally different nerd clans, right? Not even just nerd tribes, but our nerd clans are totally different. So that all that context being said, I entered into Cthulhu just with the general ethos of 2012 was when, at least for me, it was becoming impossible not to have heard about it. It was coming up on South Park.
Yep.
That was a big time when Magic the Gathering had really become a complete juggernaut, and D&D was starting to cross over where even attractive girls were playing it. The nerd girls who were attractive, but they were attractive and girls nonetheless. They were playing D&D with us, right? So my dad had played D&D 1.0, so there's cultural intergenerational D&D happening, right? So I know humanities people love stories, right? So
but have you ever played the true tabletop role playing system, which is always Call of
3.5?
Call of Cthulhu. I started with Call of Cthulhu and then went into D&D, which tells you a lot about me. So continue. Yeah.
That's an interesting line. Okay.
Yes.
So fair enough. Right. So I had heard about Cthulhu and all this stuff, and I had gotten the mythos, and then I'm like, well, let's try Lovecraft out, right? Let's just see what he's about, and read some of these stories because it's part of my heritage as a nerd, right? So I picked it up and I was like, holy shit, because the thing is, I had grown up on all of the old timey radio shows from the 30s, right? So we're talking when I was in an English class, they said, who's your favorite superhero? I said, The Shadow. And my teacher was like,
knows.
What lies in the hearts of men, right?
Yes, yeah.
And freaking my teacher said, dude, I'm too young to know about the shadow. How the heck do you know about the shadow? That was hilarious. So all of this milieu, if you're familiar with all that stuff, then I really like Edgar Allan Poe too, right? Like he's actually one of my favorite writers to listen to and to read, right? And so basically, Lovecraft, I picked him up. I was like, holy crap, this is super creative. I love this sort of tortured, but not quite Victorian prose, because Victorian prose really is tortured. And this is like the refined, like we've taken out all the nonsense words and it's just one rambly sentence that kind of, in a chiasmus situation, does beautifully onion itself back at the end of it. You see,
there's there's lots of shambling and shambling creature things at the door, and there's, did I really see a tentacle, or is it just the fact that my mother hated me growing up kind of stuff going on in Lovecraft? I mean, in many ways, his writing is very autobiographical in this respect, if you know anything about his childhood.
Well, and so there you go. And so I think so that's kind of the concrete basis by which, I'm like, okay, I can appreciate Cthulhu and the pantheon of elder gods more. And then of course the other side, right? Because I have a math autist, right? And then you're like, okay, let's categorize this stuff. So then you go out to Who Would Win Reddit, W Reddit, and you're like, okay, where is Cthulhu ranked in the pantheon of all like creatures that Western and sometimes Eastern society has come up with? And Cthulhu frequently ranks at the top of the hierarchy, like by definition, almost. In our pantheon, you cannot get more powerful than Cthulhu before you get to literal deities.
Well, but it's interesting too, because I think it's something about the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game that, not the game itself, but the name of the game. Right, there's alliteration. I understand why Sandy Peterson and co named it that, right? Call of Cthulhu. It alliterates. It's nice. It's very spooky. It's a great story within Lovecraft's, oeuvre. But I think there's this idea that people who don't ever read Lovecraft think of Cthulhu as the big bad. In reality, when you read, as you read Lovecraft, and you realize, oh, Cthulhu is just like the minor priest figure to these much worse things. So yeah, it's like as bad as Cthulhu is. He's like,
isn't it Yog-Sothoth or something as the actual big bad?
No, Azathoth.
Okay,
Azathoth. And so it's like you realize that Cthulhu is just like this relatively minor character. Well, not minor character, but a minor functionary to the rest of them. So yeah, that's a thing that I always like to point out, because again, some people who have maybe not read Lovecraft but know something about Cthulhu think of like Cthulhu, oh, it's all about stories about Cthulhu. I'm like, I mean, he's referenced in a couple ones and he shows up in Call of Cthulhu, as you would expect, but usually the stories aren't even about Cthulhu. They're about sort of all these other levels of creatures and gods out there that are just, don't give a shit about humanity and will step on you like a fly. So yeah, no, that's cool that you actually sought out and read the source material. That is, I as the other kind of nerd, as the humanities nerd, as people know who watch the show, my motto is the motto of the Reformation, is ad fontes, to the source, right? And so yeah, like go to the source. Yeah, but no,
it's funny how many people claim to be people or science folks and not actually want to look at any data, and frequently the data is watching the movie, right, or whatever,
right, reading the book. Yeah,
exactly. So that kind of, I don't know, it's like I'm trying to think, because there's a couple of different directions to go from here. One of them is
it's a Friday night, talk about, you do what you want.
I know, right? So I think one of the directions that would be interesting to set up for the Nick Land point later on is to point out, like, let's think, because I think that people don't quite appreciate, if they haven't really thought about what is horrific, what is horror, and what is really scary, especially because, as I always like to say, cities are crazy because they don't have bears. So they actually don't really understand, for the most part, what scary shit is, because they can sort of just see scary things that are objectively scary and just mod them out, because a scary thing is not going to cross the street to them, right? So there's these levels of horror, and maybe you can refine this initial way that I've got here, which is that I would say there's horror that is like almost on the savannah horror, right? It's like there's a tiger, it's gonna eat me, I need to run away, right? That's like Scream, like a lot of
slashers. So yeah, I do think a lot about the subgenres of horror, and so and not to derail not to bogart the point, but yeah, like I tend to think a lot about, like, I've even taught courses on horror before. So like what are the hallmarks of, I don't know, the gothic horror novel or the slasher, right? And the slasher definitely in this case, yeah, it regardless of who the bad guy is, whether he's supernatural or not, right? Like, he's coming to get you. He has some sort of bladed implement, which, from an evolutionary standpoint, fill in large teeth or claws. It's the same thing, right? Functions the same way. Fun little side note: most knives are actually based on, early knives are based on this on creature designs, like on actual teeth and stuff like that. Anyhow,
interesting.
Yeah, at least in many parts of the world, the early primitive knives are actually clearly based on actual animals. So anyhow, side note, which sort of underscores this savannah horror point of like, oh my gosh, it's the lion, it's coming for me, and he's hungry, right? And you're like, but what does the lion want? To eat me, right? But what is that larger implication for the world? It doesn't matter.
There is none. You have a body. He wants to eat the body. It's not very complicated in that way. And the horror usually comes at, basically the horror that this kind of horror gets at is, what if I or my tribe totally fucks up, right? Yeah. Like, that's basically the people, this has a lot of the cheap horror tropes where it's like, oh, they tripped, or oh, they made a bad choice.
They split up,
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, well, dude, like, what if in that moment your tribe really fucked it up, right? Tripping is really fucking it up. If you're martially skilled even a little bit, you're not going to trip as much. But it's like, yeah, but because we are significantly more hapless than a lot of people who actually do like everyday jobs would have been, right? So it's like, yeah, what if I'm weak? What if my body that's designed to defend me against these lions messes up and the lion eats my family? That's that level of horror. Totally real. Every animal experiences this level of horror. A cat gets this.
Yes.
Right.
Well,
so, and literally
it's baked in.
Yeah, it's baked in,
it's
right?
In that low part of your well, I don't know what part of your brain. I'm not it's the lower part of your brain, right? It's like, this is the keep you alive.
The brain stem, the stem, right? Yeah. So that's like the most like basic, and not in a mean way, but basic form of horror. Then you get like the next level of horror is like, what about that? But the sphere you have couldn't possibly work. So like Freddy Krueger, he follows you into your dreams. Ooh, that's pretty spooky, because now you're kind of like able to run, but you can't hide and you can't really stab the thing back. And even if you're playing at the top of your game.
Yeah, or we should say one of the, again, to give slashers their credit, still probably one of the best horror movies ever made. It's hard for me to pick my favorite, but the original Halloween, John Carpenter, Michael Myers. Yeah, you can. How many times is he wounded? It doesn't matter. He's literally an unstoppable force. Like, he's just coming for you. Yeah, so that's like, if the spear doesn't work. Yeah, what if you have an impervious? He doesn't care. He just do anything.
Yeah. What if it's not that you dip at you? It's not you have a bad day. Your best day couldn't fight this guy off, right? But the thing is, it's like a lot of times this horror is the same thing as like a sci-fi fantasy. It's just that the sci-fi fantasy, the difference between a horror where I can't do anything, I have the MacGuffin, the magic sword that augments my capabilities so that I could kill this beast that without my own spear couldn't, right? Or it's the holy talisman, or the
plus 10 against all undead. Yeah.
Right. The phaser or whatever, right? So it's cosmic horror it's a horror that's tiny bit outside of your reach, but if you expand it, it becomes an action adventure instead.
Right. Yeah. Depending on how you frame it. Yeah.
Right. So there's that one. And then and this is where I would struggle before we go like all the way. I think there's like Thanos maybe might be the next version of horror of like, dude, there's this unstoppable force. We augmented ourselves and we still couldn't get it. Rather than the reason why I bring Thanos is because Thanos looks at this person, because see, the lion's trying to eat you. So at least it cares about you being dead. Freddy Krueger's coming for you specifically, right? Thanos looks at you and you're like, you took everything from me. And he's like, I don't know you, right? That is horrific. It's like, holy shit, there's this guy about to kill everything I love and he doesn't even know or care about me.
Right.
This is why Nazis are horrific, or the people are horrific. God damn it. You know what I mean? The people are horrific, and the communists are horrific because they don't care about you. You're a number on a spreadsheet, and again, that number needs to be 0.
Elliott, what was the Italian fascist motto?
No, we don't care.
We don't care.
Exactly.
People are like, yeah, but they're right wing. I'm like, oh, right wing people care about a ton of shit, and fascists don't usually care. So.
Well, and anyway, there's I've been doing a little bit of research on that, and I would start to agree that fascists are so pragmatic that they kind of don't really fit in the left-right 100%. You know,
sociopathic pragmatism or something like that. I guess you'd say, yeah, something like that.
No, it's totally weird. So essentially, it's and this is why a lot of people are really creeped out by the Nazis and communists, because unlike, say, the Americans who are like, we are, you know, actually the Americans are another great example too, actually, but unlike people who are like, we're gonna kill you in particular or your family in particular or whatever because of something you did, it's like, nah, we just need you not to exist, and so we need your number to be equal to 0. And that thought process of not even recognizing you as a human, that's pretty horrific, right? It's like, oh shit, right? So then we do a kind of a jump up to Cthulhu, which is cosmic, or Galactus is the next example up of like, hey, I'm just eating and you're part of my food, right? And then you have Cthulhu, who is like way beyond Galactus in terms of like, dude, see, because Galactus isn't making you go crazy. You look at him and you can understand it. You can see what he's doing. With Cthulhu, the notion is that this is such an alien creature intersecting with your reality that it just literally makes you go, your mind cannot handle it. And it's not like Cthulhu is malicious. He's just sleeping. And as soon as he wakes up and his buddies wake up, like, this universe is going to just casually unwind because he stubbed it with his toe type of thing. And that's freaking horrific. That's the cosmic horror that we're talking about.
Yeah. I want to just add one thing, if I may. So we're talking here about like the ratcheting up of sort of scale of horror. Obviously, within each of these sort of levels, there's actually, it expands outward too, because as somebody who's a great fan of horror, and particularly of folk horror, you have all this sort of other genres of horror that deal with sort of the terror of people over there. What does that neighboring tribe want? What, they're weird. Don't go over there. They eat their children. So there's many.
Sounds like CNN.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, as I like to say on the Twitters, the great god Demos is a hungry and jealous god, and he demands your children. So, yes, topic for another day, perhaps. But yeah, no. So obviously, there's multiple. We're not talking about these are the only kinds of horror. Obviously, as any horror fan is going to go. Actually, we're talking about sort of the ratcheting up of scale, right? So just purely horror of scale, right? There's different types of horror operate at different scale, and cosmic horror, what Lovecraft was writing, and in many ways pioneering, at least as it's currently understood, for better or for worse, probably both. All of cosmic horror, all of weird fiction is heavily indebted to Lovecraft, and I mean like really good and bad, in both good and bad ways.
Right.
But yeah, one of the hallmarks of cosmic horror is this. Well, this we've talked again previously with Marshall a bit about this, and we hope to have Marshall back on too to continue talking about that. This idea of cosmicism, that humanity is nothing. Like, who are you? You think you're fancy? Yeah, you're just an ape. What are you compared to everything out there in the void?
Actually,
Maybe
know
there are
what?
things in the void that have existed almost eternally. And what if they,
It,
yeah, like you said, what if they really don't care at all?
well, I think actually, if you want to know what I would imagine is one of the earliest examples of this is the end of the book of Job, where God comes in and says, "Bro, you think this whole story is about you, but like you know that everything is literally bigger than you, right?" Like,
But Elliot, I can do all things through a verse taken out of context.
you got to believe though.
Yeah. Oh man, I can do all things through a verse taken out of context. Yeah. No, yeah. These ideas. I mean, cosmicism as it's currently instantiated is clearly comes from Lovecraft, but like Lovecraft's drawing upon lots of things. And yeah, I mean, I would argue any older human mythological tradition is going to have elements of cosmicism. And I mean, yeah, the Hebrew, excuse me, and the Christian parts of the Bible, so from a Christian perspective, Old and New Testament are both have some like strong cosmic horror elements. I mean, what could be more terrifying from a Christian perspective than like God abandons himself and darkness covers the land? I mean, that's pretty cosmic, man. Again, whether you believe that or not, okay, fine. But like as a story, it's pretty dang cosmic in like that terrifying sense. Like God abandons himself. What
This
does
is
that
where
mean?
Christians actually do kind of, I feel like the flock a disservice a little bit. Of course, it's kind of difficult because the story is spoiled, right? But they're so focused on making sure that the Christ story is an action adventure that they don't really let you sit with how horrific it would be for the disciples in those days. It's amazing that in the story, everybody just did suicide on the spot, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, probably a little bit beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but Elliot, after we're done, I'm going to send you a reading list because actually there are many Christians who have, there's a whole theology of the cross out there that's all about that. Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, when people ask me why I love horror so much, I'm like, yeah, but I'm a Christian, so of course I got to love horror because it's kind of, it's not everything about the story, but it's kind of part of it. Yeah, so to bring us a little bit back more on point. Cosmicism is something that humans have been wrestling with for probably ever since there's been a somewhat self-aware, mostly human primate who looked at the sky and went, wow, there's like lights out there. I can't touch them. I climbed onto the top of the hill and I still can't touch them. They must be really far away or something. I'm going to come up with a theory about what they are, but the world is big. You know, I think that experience, and we all have versions of that experience growing up and as adults. And I think it can fill you with wonder and awe, but it can also fill you with terror because, you know, as Lovecraft would say, that the greatest fear of all is the fear of the unknown. The thing you can't, not just the thing that you don't know, the thing that you literally can't understand, the thing you can't,
right.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, which is absolutely right. So you think about a lion that is totally invisible to all your senses, but is wandering around, right? And that's pretty terrifying, right?
It is. But if it bleeds, we can kill it. Just say
well, yes, exactly. Hashtag predation. Am I right?
Yes.
But anyway, point being,
hashtag predation.
So the thing is, I'm not cultured, but I watch reviews, and people were actually pretty okay with the current Predator that was like the Cherokee chick. They were disappointed that they like undercut her, ironically, but you know, anyway.
I haven't seen it, but it's a Comanche, right? Yeah. I haven't seen it. I should watch it. Anyhow, so let's start turning the boat just a little bit here. So, you know, for those, I think most people probably who have some knowledge of Cthulhu, I think are probably watching this channel. I think we're pretty niche. But if you don't, you know, a general introduction to Lovecraft, his ideas of like elder god beings who don't care about humanity, but definitely can destroy humanity if they want to. And there's the element too of Lovecraft. And I want to point this out because I think this may provide us a nice segue into like, what does this have to do? Why use the metaphor of Cthulhu when talking about the left? And that is that in Lovecraft stories, there are groups of humans who do know about, at least they have some general idea that there are, you know, alien god creatures from beyond. who are very, well, maybe not even malevolent, but just uncaring about humanity. And some of those humans who know this worship them, and not just as some sort of random idea, like, you know, kind of like ironic Satanists nowadays, but like actually seek to like summon them into our world. And so a lot of Lovecraft stories are about, you know, like the cult of XYZ elder gods. So, you know, in this case, the cult of Cthulhu. Well, what do? Well, they hang out and they try to summon Cthulhu. Right?
It's actually
Cthulhu more. They invite Cthulhu in. So.
And to be not to harp on the point, because I think it's actually pretty relevant, and I think it's very relevant as a metaphor, especially if you're a right winger, right? That a lot of times these cults of Cthulhu are the sort of racial outgroup of something or other, right? Frequently, it's some sort of like voodoo style situation that is going, these are the folks who are going to call Cthulhu. And I think that there's a lot of right wingers who are caught up in this idea that, yep, we agree with Lovecraft 1.0, that's the case. And I think what we're here to kind of, well, at least that, what the message I would say is, no, actually, it's much, it's not in-group, out-group. There is like, it's across every group, and it's called the left. Yeah.
100%. Where this is the brilliance and the stupidity of Lovecraft, is that he's, you know, he's sort of in his fictional world is talking about, you know, there's people who welcome darkness and welcome chaos in. But the problem is because he's just so, I guess, single-mindedly racist in many ways. He's like, it's always the out group. It can never be our group that's doing that. When I would agree with you 100%, Elliott. If you look,
it would never be good Christian boys and girls.
Yeah, it's like, well, obviously there's evil across all groups and good, and humans are complex, and you cannot ascribe goodness or badness purely to in-group, out-group type situation. I mean, that is so reductive. So again, this is what I was talking about earlier, like just a great example of it. Like you get this great idea with Lovecraft, and then it's just sort of drawn back to this like clearly like, you know, early 20th century prejudice, and you're like, oh, you just failed. Like the brilliance and then the failure of it too, right? Like,
yeah, you just missed the mark by like almost a hair.
But by missing the mark by a hair, you've also like the trajectory was such that you've now rocketed off into the, you know, you missed the moon and now have fun. You're just like out in the void of space, right? Like have fun.
Exactly.
You're like so far off at the same time. But yeah, no, I mean the people who welcome in chaos can be found across the board, and you know, the people who tend to be the most powerful who do this are usually in the in-group in a society. They're usually the ones with the most prestige, as a general rule, right? Because they're the ones who can, the people who can who can sort of do the most damage are the ones who have the most power. And so, yeah, by definition, I think in some ways this is sort of maybe like Lovecraft's his own kind of little weird cope or something like that. He doesn't want to recognize, because he seems like a smart person. I think, again, towards the later part of his life, I think he was starting to kind of get this, that, oh, like maybe it's the white people too, who, and probably more the white people, because at least in a North American context, there's more white people, right? Like statistically speaking, it's gonna be, oh, maybe it's my group, sort of the Anglo-Americans who have the prestige and power who are the problem.
You know, we have in many ways the benefits of so many wonderful examples of everybody just being totally cringe and blue-pilled in every direction, right? Like, you know, nobody is safe. There's African dictators who are both communists and fascists and capitalists, right? Everybody in Asia, everybody in America, and everybody has had their crack at being a dick, and, you know, shown themselves to have human faults, right? So step one. Step two, I don't know when Woodrow Wilson happened relative to, during his lifetime, right? Yeah. So that's sort of the thing, right? It's like you get examples of stuff throughout your life. And me as a thinking person, I've had examples throughout my life that have challenged, I've changed. And that's not really the arc of the story here. I think that, so that's kind of that. What I would say, so to your point of scale, this is something I kind of point out about billionaires, right? And it's really important to kind of note is that, hey, everybody that you know almost certainly makes like 100K or less, right? Okay, what's the difference between somebody who makes 50K or 100K and $1,000 billion or $1,000 million, which is what
Right.
a billion is 1,000 million, right? Well, the difference is basically the same order of magnitude difference between a bacteria and an elephant. And a bacteria versus an elephant, the bacteria could kill the elephant if it multiplies, but the elephant has this whole immune system that casually takes care of the bacteria in the background without the elephant even skipping a beat, while the elephant pays attention to the other relevant animals, elephants, tigers, humans, right? And so relative to a billionaire, like you're literally not a problem because they have entire systems to just casually take care of you without them even thinking about that shit, right? So step one. So here is where I think we started to get more cosmic scale angst going on, because before then, the difference between a king and a peasant was like a couple of dudes with spears, right? Pretty straightforward to pick up your own spear and overtake that and kill the king, which is why the king was pretty stoked about people bowing and being deferential, because it's very important, right? You don't have to bow to Elon Musk because like he could ruin your life 6 ways to Sunday without you even knowing it's happening, right?
Oh yeah. No, the Yarvin reader in me is totally agreeing with you. The Hoppa reader in me is totally agreeing with you. Yes.
Right. And so for the first time in the early 20th century, we have this sudden expansion of, like, the thing is that they talk about the wage gap, but I don't think people realize what happened with the power gap. I use monetary differences, not because I think money corrupts or anything like that, but just to demonstrate like how irrelevant everybody for most of the 20th century was to the ruling class up until the internet happened, and then huge problem, right? Because then all of a sudden, all the plebs have the amount of power to start wiping out the billionaire infrastructure, right? So anyway, my point being about all that rambliness is that I think that Cthulhu was once again sort of humans starting to think through, oh shit, the universe is really, really big. We got to the next biggest mountain, which was combustion engines, right?
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I that's a really good point. I think that's, it's easy. In hindsight, it's easy to see why Lovecraft was writing about Cthulhu and the other elder gods in an era of huge technological revolution, but also sort of just like death. Because
God was dead solidly by then, right?
It's I think that's Yarvin, right? The 20th century is the democide century. It's a century where, you just wipe out. Not that people didn't do that before, but they got a lot better at just casually, uncaringly wiping out whole sections of their own. It's not even like the other people. It's like, let's just liquidate part of our population. They eat too much grain anyhow. So, and I mean, lots of examples.
It'll be good for the environment.
It'll be good for the environment. Yeah. It's almost like that's happening again.
Well, because what's his name?
Elliott,
Malthus?
relaxed. Elliott, relax, because you're going to own nothing and you're going to like it. Okay.
Well, yeah, and I'll make sure to eat the bugs too.
Eat the bugs, and you need to clean up your pod. It's dirty.
What freaking kills me, by the way, also is that I would actually like, gosh, it's anyway. Regardless, it's a total different tangent. Point being is that So the reason why I got reinterested in Cthulhu was Nick Land, but yes.
Well, it makes sense that Cthulhu is expanding in popularity again, because this never stopped in the 20th century, but then we have the 21st century, sort of, it just continues, but it's the 2.0. And it's sort of, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, there's like, there's the colonization of the world, but then there's like the colonization of your even ability to sense the world, right? Sort of like the cybernetic colonization of like this like metaphysical / you could make an argument spiritual colonization, not just in the sense of like believe in our religion or die, but like in this like you don't even need to believe in our religion, because we're gonna just change the way you see reality. We're gonna manage it in that managerial way, and we're gonna manage everything, and we're gonna manage you into a new way of a new human, gonna be a new thing,
And so actually, oh gosh, this is so great because we're kind of pinging off a lot of, we're actually creeping towards the reason why I was thinking about Cthulhu again in the first place, which is great because essentially like what we're starting to get at here is that 1984 is horrific, but a lot of people think it's horrific because of Big Brother, and they think it's horrific because because of you know, the surveillance trait, the kind of Foucauldian panopticon. And if you said panopticon, that's from Foucault. Hate to say it. I'm not a pro Foucault guy.
No,
but, just
no. By the way, no. I mean, everyone should read Foucault, but I actually am not going to talk about what Foucault did on this channel because I like this channel to continue to exist.
No, for sure, for sure. He's a bad dude. He's a bad dude for sure. But point being, he had some, like, again, separating the thinker from the thoughts.
made some good points. Not a very good person, but yeah,
we're not going to bring that up.
Yeah,
but basically, like, we're not going to bring that up. But point being is that, like, he oh goodness, what was the thing? Sorry, the panopticon. Everybody focused on the panopticon part. But actually, the really scary thing that they actually just look at the camera and explain through a book and through actually O'Brien, right, is they say, no, previous generations of totalitarian regimes said, you know, it's okay. We're going to control the body. If you don't believe us, we're going to kill you, right? And then they said, look, we just need lip service from you. That's not enough for us. The only way that we will actually sustainably maintain power is, one, to never have any ideology, focus on power for its own sake, which is something that, you know, people are talking about again. And secondly, it's not enough to eliminate the cancer. We need to change your mind. We need you not to, it's not enough for you to say or confess that 2 + 2 = 5. You need to actually see it with your eyes. So the torture will continue until you genuinely see 2 + 2 = 5. Well, and that is 1984.
Yeah, and this also connects to Paul Gottfried's therapeutic state, right? Like the function of a state is, I mean, that's statist, bro. Okay, leaving the libertarianism behind, right? Okay, the state exists. It will exist for the foreseeable future. Get over it. Okay, but if you're going to have a state, right, it's like, what's the purpose of a state? And there's lots of different ideas. But yeah, this connects to Paul Gottfried's idea of, like, well, you know, people in managerial positions view the state as exactly this. Well, we are here to therapeutically change through various means the way you perceive reality. Yeah, and the 2 + 2 = 5 thing is that, right?
Which is exactly why, and right. So that's kind of huge cultural touch point one, and then the second touch point is that the postmodernists then are basically, many of them are responding, particularly like Deleuze, who I think is the best out of them, in my opinion, from what I've read so far. Deleuze is pointing out, hey, you know, when the liberals are talking about, like, the media and stuff, the reason why they're nervous about it is because it's sort of the velvet glove version of 1984. Because basically the state has figured out, oh, hey, actually, we can use stuff like the social credit system, like social. So there's been experiments done that where they have 5 people lined up and there's only one test subject and the other 4 are in on the experiment, right? What they do is they put you last in the chair and they put the other 4 people who are in on it right ahead of you, and they'll show you 2 different pictures of a rectangle and a slightly different rectangle, like very, very slightly thicker or whatever, right? The first 4 people will say, yep, they're the same, right? And then you'll see it with your eyes and you might wonder for a moment, are they the same? But then at the end of it, a lot of people, the vast majority of people, will say, sure, they're the same. I must be wrong. Everybody else is right? And they went through this over and over again, and it got to the point where people would say, after they had been trained to kind of trust the other 4 people in the group, they were saying that a circle and a triangle were the same. I mean, I don't know if it was quite that extreme, but it might as well have been that extreme. You could objectively tell with your own eyes, but because we our notion of truth is not just grounded in our own brains, it's also socially based as well,
Yes.
not in a sort of Rousseauian way, but in like an evolutionary biology way.
Yep.
Right, where like literally in order for us as humans to verify reality, we have gotten used to intersubjectively recognizing, oh, you know what, if I'm the only one out, I must be wrong and not seeing it correctly. I better trust the group this time.
And this is something I'm gonna get my digs in when I can, Elliot. God love y'all. This is something that libertarians have yet to truly, at least many libertarians have
Correct.
at least, not necessarily the thinkers, not the Rothbards, not the Hoppas, not the Hayeks, not the Misesises, but like the followers have yet to truly get is that even if you happen to be that one individual who can actually, you know, I stand against everyone else. Okay. You probably, if you think you're that person, you're probably not that person, first of all. Second of all, even if you are that person, how does your ideology attempt to overcome this innate psychological, biologically inherited tendency in humans that because we're social animals?
And can you do that for everything everywhere, right? And that's really what the postmodernists are kind of pointing out is like, dude, look at the amount of media, look at the amount of TikTok, look at the amount of YouTube, look at the amount of newspapers. Like, here's the problem is that like basically
hey, we're out there, we're contributing to it because we're on YouTube, right? It's just so
no, exactly.
Yeah, we're out there too.
One of my favorite video game critics, Yahtzee, from I forget what the thing was, but anyway, Yahtzee, Zero Punctuation. He said, hey, you know, a lot of people think about finding a YouTube video like finding a bottle in the, you know, in an ocean, but actually it's trying to find a message in the bottle in an ocean of messages in bottles, right? And so here's the issue, right, is that I won't really go into explaining Bayes' theory, but it's Bayes' theorem, but it's very cool. Essentially, the issue is that with all of the level of media, CNN wins not because it's even credible. The issue is that in order for you to falsify every fact that they come out with, assuming that they're closer to white noise, right? It's exhausting. You literally can't keep up with it. I was able to do it in college, but not when I have a job.
Well, and you also, and at some point you realize that you actually, not only can you not, you really should not. You shouldn't.
Right, because it's more likely that you're going to accidentally believe some of their crappy facts
and it's also,
than you are to disprove them all.
But this is, I'm going to steer us back towards the Cthulhu thing. Is that this is, they want you to react. Now, everyone likes to hate watch. I'm not against all hate watching. I'm not against, I mean, you have to react to some things, otherwise you never get to use and refine your thoughts, right? Or your values or whatever's important to you in that moment. But you really, it is designed to react to. And there's something about, and this is a thing that Yarvin talked about recently, and we covered this on this channel as well with Marshall, about the sort of principles of deep right. This is the Tolkien, the first of the Yarvin Tolkien articles, recent articles about how, okay, like, so there's media that is put out there that's designed for you to hate it. And it looks like everything you hate, it's the anglerfish's little decoy, right? Like, so whatever you do, don't chomp on that thing because it comes from a source, in this case, CNN. It is notorious for this, right? They're not hiding the fact that they're doing it. They know that you know that it's probably fake. In fact, they want you to know that it's fake because then you reflexively lash out at it. And then they can see it's the I'm not touching you, right? And it's like, oh, mommy hit me, you know, like all this thing. And this is, I think this does connect to what we're talking, sort of the broader idea here of viewing the left as a cult of Cthulhu, because they're actively welcoming in chaos. And because they don't need to have, I mean, if you worship and follow an elder god that is himself priest to bigger, crazier gods of literal chaos, of that humans can't understand, are not supposed to understand, shouldn't even try to understand. Well, what do you care about? Logic, order, reason, any of those things. You don't actually care about it. So in a situation like this, well, what do? Can you just punch Cthulhu? I mean, how's that going to work out for you? I mean, Cthulhu doesn't care. So what do you do? Well, I mean, I don't know. That's the big question. And I think that's the question that the right, or even just the non-left, is dealing with right now. But I think it's safe to say, until we figure out really what to do, and there's probably not going to be one thing to do, I think it's like, don't fall for it as best you can. Don't fall for it. These are they're traps that they know that you know it's a trap. Don't. It's just like 4D chess. Like, just don't. Obviously, keep tabs on what's going on. The cult of Cthulhu is out there doing things, trying to summon an elder god. It's a problem, but don't. The instant you start operating in kind of in their vein of, is it true or is it false? Is it misinformation or is it real? Like, I'm like, you're wasting time and energy. This is like, it's a war of they're waging a war of attrition. So stop fighting in a way that they expect. And we don't mean, and I will double down, so we don't mean fighting in a physical sense at all. We mean in an ideological sense. Don't, like, there's a drain, right? Like, there's a drain of looking too deeply into the void, right? Like, as Nietzsche would warn us, right? Like, there's something that happens when you do that too much. You focus so much on what you dislike that you don't really focus on what you do stand for. And there's a real temptation, because it's a very human thing to have, like you've been talking about, have this sort of this group solidarity. And then there's a very human temptation as well to have this, well, they all say it's, the circle's a square or whatever it was, so it must be that way. It's like, yeah, but maybe stop looking at the clearly, orchestrated experiment designed to get you to see circles as squares, and look at like other things that are probably more important, right? Because there's a lot of purposeful distraction happening. I don't know. Sorry for that's my attempt at steering it back to what we're talking about here. But I do think the point holds that this is a tactic used. Obviously the left isn't literally worshiping Cthulhu. We hope, but if they were, they would do stuff like this. Because if you've read any of Lovecraft stories or any of the other, expanded Cthulhu mythos stories, the cults are doing things like this. They're trying to draw people into a trap to make them see the unseeable and then go crazy, because the madness fuels it, right? The madness fuels Cthulhu's power. Anyhow,
right, and just to kind of clarify, it was very interesting, because I think the most recent version of this that I've seen is the Rings of Power, right? So there are the kind of libertarian wing of people who will hate watch the Rings of Power because they're like, oh, I hate it, right? And I gotta speak against it, right? I got to point they got wrong, right?
Yeah.
Right, and I've got to like whine about it all. It's like, okay, good job giving them free marketing, right? Yes. Step one.
The best thing is to say, what show? And
yes,
and I'll give him some credit, because I'm a fan of his. Aaron McIntyre made this point, and I had hate watched the first 2 episodes, and I forget which episode it was. He's like, don't even watch that shit, and I was like, you know what? You're right. Why am I wasting my evenings after work watching this horrible show? Like, I'm going to watch something I want to watch.
Right. So I want to like tease out a couple of different things real quick, because it's actually kind of important. Is that like, so that is from the football fan perspective, right? Is that actually everybody loves everybody else's teams, even the teams they hate, right? Because it's just like, me and my family against my tribe, me and my brother against my cousin, right? Yep. And then me and my cousin and my brother against the infidel type of situation. Well, yep. Hey, it's me and, it's the Seahawks and the Packers against, the people, the Tom Brady team, right? I'm struggling here. The Patriots, the Seahawks and the Packers against the Patriots, everybody against soccer, right? But it turns out that all of sports kind of self-reinforces itself in terms of being that family feud situation of like, hey, we have rules in which we feud reasonably, right? And we all, choose to watch, sometimes still watch games of teams they don't even care about because they're hate watching the other team. and
Right.
that is engaging in sports. So
Right.
like, and that's fine. That's a good, healthy activity in a lot of ways. Not too much, obviously, but it's good, healthy. It could be virtuous, right? Here's the thing, right? Is that hate watching messages you hate amplifies them, right? And so that really does cause that thing you hate to get stronger. Period. End of story. You're an actor by watching. It's very weird.
Well,
So
and
so
it's a problem.
that
And it's a problem too, though, because if you don't watch them, then you don't know what they're doing. So it's this weird thing where you have to kind of know. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. You have to kind of knowingly watch the cult rituals, but recognize as best you can when you're starting to get hypnotized by them,
well
and then
and
go,
and, and
okay, enough for today or this week or whatever, right? And then, and I think part of it too is watch pay attention to what your enemy is doing, but it's supposed, instead of going, see, they're doing the bad thing, go, okay, so like, this is obviously bad. What do I want to do in response to this? Like, what kind of things do I stand for? Because they clearly don't stand for what I stand for, right? So I think maybe this is just an argument for kind of in a controlled setting, horrifying yourself on a daily basis is like, well, okay, I'm horrified by this. Okay, instead of going, well, I can't believe it. No, we know that horrific people are capable of horrific things. So, okay, that's horrifying. Why is that? These are questions I ask myself. Why is that? Why am I so repulsed by this? Is that rational or is it completely stupid? Sometimes, it's me just being kind of dumb. But sometimes, if it's clearly something that's ideologically driven, that's being crammed down people's throats, I'm like, okay, so this is bad, but why is that, right? Don't just go boomer rage rant, blah, like,
yeah.
okay, why is this? And then go, okay, this is why I hate this so much. So what am I going to do in response? Because
Absolutely.
that is far more, even if there's nothing I can in that moment do, it still frames it better for me. And then maybe I'm just speaking personally here, but like, it frames it for me. Like, okay, well, what can I do? Well, I can't stop this thing. I can't stop that thing, right? I can't do any of these I can't save the day. I don't have, again, I'm a normal person. I'm not a billionaire. I don't have sweeping power. Well, what can I do? Well, I can, again, this channel is also very pro Tolkien. It's like, well, I can be as Hobbit-like as possible, right, that day. Or I can try to convince one person over the course of in my life, right, like a friend or something like that maybe like what is on the TV is not really good for you all the time. Not that it's all bad, but like maybe there is stuff, messages, ideologies that are being pushed that are not really great for you. And if you can do that, again, it's not like, well, you didn't fix the problem. I'm like, yeah, well, the problem's big and vast and is uncaring, kind of like Cthulhu. So like,
well, and this is where it's really
you literally can't
right?
punch Cthulhu, right? You, at least as a normal person,
exactly.
You can't do it. So what do? Well, there are times in life, I think, where you have to combat evil, but you can't always combat evil. Sometimes you have to just sort of grow your garden and build community as best you can. And that is maybe like naive or something like that, but like, well, what are you going to do? Otherwise you run the risk of like every single Lovecraft protagonist, you just run the risk of going insane. And what does that do, right? What does the going insane, and that benefits Cthulhu, because Cthulhu runs on human madness, or at least uses it to his advantage to a certain extent, right? So yeah.
Well, and this is where like it's really interesting, right? Because now we're ready actually to get to the hardcore reason why Cthulhu was in my brain, was because I was reading some of the CCRU, which was the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit, right? And so
that's at University of Warwick, right?
Yeah, and then they got kicked out because they're too edgy.
They got kicked out.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny actually, because when you read, sort of the response to Nick Land, a lot of the lefties are like, "What happened? What?" They're trying to do a post-mortem, and essentially, I think the issue, right, is that it's sort of similar to like, so. Within people could say very similar things about like my old Christian community, say, right? They could say, what happened to Elliott, right? And the correct response to a Christian person is, hey, you know what? He thought too hard, right? He engaged with the bad ideas too much.
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, that would be a potential Christian response. Yes.
Well, no, for that particular Christian
Oh, for that
response,
particular
right?
group.
Because
Okay, I was like, whoa,
yeah, yeah,
whoa,
yeah.
whoa. Wide, that's a
No,
pretty
yeah,
broad
yeah.
brush there, but yes.
Because
Yeah, yeah.
this particular Christian group is going to
Okay.
see Lutherans as isomorphic to Catholics, right? Just to be clear, you see what I
Oh yeah,
mean? Like,
we have,
yeah.
yeah. We get a lot of hate for being too Catholic, and yeah, I feel you. Yeah.
No, totally. Yeah.
We're not quite Anglo enough, anyhow, from an immigration history perspective. So yeah. We're a little too kind of continental and Scandinavian. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. So just to clarify, yeah, of course, right. So but there's lots of Christians but point being is that like, so and that kind of makes sense in a certain way, right? Because what literally happened to me is I read too much and then I was convinced differently of a thing. Like there was literally information that was sort of a poison pill that I naively ate, and then I lost my faith. And the thing is that it was a little bit of a macho thing, because I was like, oh, there's nothing that could make me lose my faith in that way, because I've already read the Bible. I'm not scared by anything that atheists are saying. And then all of a sudden I came to the one thing that was actually like a good argument, a properly good argument. I was like, oh, snap. Well, that's kind of what I'm talking about, right? I'm not saying that you have to fear wokeism or nothing. What I am saying, though, is that like, the scale is just totally different. And essentially what the cybernetic culture research thing is saying is, hey, what if culture gained consciousness and kind of not consciousness and self-consciousness, but what if it was, go listen to the cybernetic episode, what if it became a cybernetic entity in and of itself?
What if it was
started to have, what if it was always there, right? And what if now it's sophisticated enough, it's big enough, it's able to think faster than it ever has before, because of basically industrialized culture, because propagandists got really good at nurturing and growing new cultures and standing them up and everything. I mean, we talk about corporate culture as if you could just grow it in a lab. And so what the cybernetic culture research unit was talking about, and there's this really interesting thing, and I learned this, believe it or not, on one of those crappy YouTube philosophy iceberg videos, where they talked about the Lemurian Time War, And this is where all of a sudden you start to get into mega continental philosophy, where everything is ridiculously dense and sometimes vaguely cyclical, but actually still sensible in a lot of ways, right? And where they were talking about, what if right now, and this is the whoa dude moment, what if right now we were engaged in an intertemporal war between entities in the past and in the future, right, trying to fight over the fate of the universe, right? And one of the ways in which they fight over the fate of the universe is by sending messages to each other back and forward through time. Well, what would a message being sent backwards through time look like? Well, we understand the flow of time through something called entropy, which is essentially what looks more like a patterned thing and what looks less like a patterned thing. So essentially, entropy is closer to white static noise, right? To just TV white static noise than it is to an apple, right? Because there's fewer ways in which you can see an apple than in which you could see white noise if you arrange the pixels on a screen, so to speak. It turns out in the universe, it's literally the same thing. It's hardly even a metaphor at that point. So that is to say, we understand, and Land points this out. He's like, hey, like the reason why we think a glass, why we see time is because a glass breaks and flies apart. And we don't typically see things coming together, Terminator 1 style, right? Forming together.
I'm thinking more like Tenet, if you've seen Tenet, but yeah.
Oh, I have not, but
another
good reference.
This is we'll watch it together. It's a good movie. Yeah,
awesome. Okay,
we'll deals with this. It deals with all of this. Yeah. Anyhow,
right.
Yeah.
And so frequently we don't see things manifesting in terms of flying together, but actually we see quite a few things flying together. It's only in retrospect that it's clear where they were all headed, right? So for instance, so a star, right, goes through its whole thing, it burns, and then gravity collapses it all together. Well, if you were looking at that from a normal temporal thing, you're like, oh, time is running backwards because the star is collapsing and stars only ever expand, right? If that was your frame of mind, right? But actually, what's happening is that it's all gathering up to one point. There's another notion, mathematically speaking, called a strange attractor, which is a chaos theory notion, and essentially, it's a anyway, I'm not going to describe it too much, but it's essentially a pattern that's hard to see, but it's sort of looping around a central point, right? So point being is that what if Cthulhu literally is all of these different entities sort of in our current time period, we can see Cthulhu starting to congeal in the same way that we would see like if you had a 3-dimensional spiky ball poking into a 2-dimensional plane, and you would see all the spikes happen first, and you're like, oh, these are different entities, and then all of a sudden they start to merge together, and then boom, you get the full spiky ball. What if Cthulhu is this kind of what's called hyperstitional reality starting to congeal amongst itself? And a hyperstition is like, think about a superstition, but that causes it's a hyper object, right? So it causes itself to become true, basically, right? So it's sort of like, the easiest example of, you will think of an elephant, right? And that's a statement, or like mind viruses, or another hyperstitional one, or things like the Szechuan sauce from Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty resurrected the Szechuan sauce, right? Not by causing anything to happen, but by purely referencing it. And then the cybernetic culture caused McDonald's to incentively react to it. And then boom, Szechuan sauce materialized again in reality through factories and shit. So like, that's how Cthulhu happens, is through all of these various different ways, starting to congeal sort of in a time war, so to speak. So anyway, I'll give the talking stick back.
The one thing that, that's good. And I guess so the one thing is, and I'm genuinely interested to hear this. I think I definitely have my ideas, and I've hinted at some of them here about why the left is why one can view the left as sort of, either knowingly or unknowingly part of the cult of Cthulhu. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. Like, what is, so you've given a nice sort of very Landian hyperstitional definition, lots of fancy words today, of Cthulhu in this sense. The Rick and Morty Szechuan sauce is a great example of this. What is particularly left-leaning about that in your estimation?
Yes. Okay. And this is also very Landian in a certain way. And this is where I like, dude, bro, I think I told you when I started to read Land, and we actually started seriously about getting me on the podcast here, was I was like, dude, I don't know who the heck this guy is writing for, but it feels like he's writing for a version of me who is also a literary nerd. It's very confusing, because if that's the case, I don't know if this other person he's writing to even exists. And
well, frankly, Elliott, that other person doesn't exist yet. He's writing to your future self.
Well, no, and that's where I really had the
after you become a literary nerd and you join the humanities team.
Well, no, and this is where Land. If you're a sci-fi nerd and a literary nerd, you must read the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit, or if you're a philosophy nerd or a math nerd, because frankly, he's got those people are thinking on so many different dimensions at the same time. Like, it's really quite astonishing, and frankly, they might be writing for future AIs. I don't know. And there's a lot of playful, like, early internet to it as well. So there's a lot of shit posting, but it's also philosophical shit posting, really deep philosophical shit posting. It's kind of insane. So anyway, how is the left, the Cthulhu people? Well, it's sort of like this. It's like, are you familiar with like the basilisk thought experiment?
The name's familiar. I can't. Life of me on a Friday evening, pull it out.
Well, obviously, like, everybody knows the Harry Potter one, but essentially, okay, this is a thought experiment that maybe you want to skip ahead a few minutes if you really don't want to hear it. But it's sort of like, okay, suppose that in the future, it's pretty much guaranteed that there's going to be a really evil AI, right? And its initial thing, and this is another example of a hyperstition, by the way, a potential hyperstition, right? Suppose that in the future there is an AI that is so powerful that it can time travel, right? or at the very least, it'll be able to do basically anything in a kind of I have no mouth that I must scream type of situation, right? And suppose that it rewards that it basically totally nukes human society, makes us all pets and all this stuff, but it rewards its followers, right? The things that made it with the ability to with the ability to live happy lapdog lives, but they don't get anything else. They can't read, no fun and games. You have to do whatever the basilisk says, but you get to live under its tutelage, right? But everybody who fought against it or was indifferent gets miserably tortured to death. I can't, I have my own mouth and I must scream style, right? So the question is, what do you do right now that you know about this? Because if you know about it, it will definitely punish you 100%. So this is where, if you look at the way that the left acts, it's like history will remember you, right? You will be punished, like all of these things, and you just have to get on board with the sweep, what do they call it? The sweep of history is basically right, but it's different. No,
you
see what I mean? Like
the progressive idea that history is just an improvement upon, every year is better than the last. So,
or at the very least, like we must help out with creating this basilisk entity, because if we don't, it will retroactively punish everybody who didn't. So you could imagine like a type of Chinese social credit score that everybody who thought that credit scores were bad gets dinged on their credit. So before the credit score is even real, you should act as if their credit score could be real, so that if it does, you are rewarded. But if you act in a way, if you take that to its logical conclusion, then the people who are just not resisting will get rewarded less than the people who actively helped it. The people who actively helped the credit score, that enthusiastically tried to make it happen, will get rewarded even more. So you should try to institute the credit score, and you should try to do it fastest and most enthusiastically and right now. And that's another example of a hyperstition, right? Of a thought that causes you to make reality this thought.
Because even though the basilisk doesn't exist yet, it exists because we want it to exist yet.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to make it exist. It will be born, right?
And therefore it does.
And so, right.
Because of course it's coming in the future, don't you know? Yeah, and we don't want to be punished.
Right? Right, and it's sort of the thing of like, it's like another example, just to make people clear, because they'll say, Elliott, this all sounds abstract and not reasonable, blah, blah. I'm like, whoa. Suppose that you somehow had the ability to see, right? You could see the moment of conception somehow. You just have the superpower, right? And you see a woman walking by and you're like, oh, there's an egg in there, right? And you can clearly know that egg's going to happen. Well, again, from an entropic perspective, we expect entropy to always go downhill, and it does globally. In terms of everything is getting more chaotic. But the thing is that it's not always locally entropic, right? There are things that maintain homeostasis, that maintain an orderly structure on local scales, right? And pay attention very closely to that if you're a right winger, right? Because that actually is very important. But moving right along to this,
it's also
metaphor,
a white
right?
pill.
It's also a little bit of a white pill for sure.
Well, it's daily white pills. Take them with your breakfast.
Yeah, daily white pills.
Take them with your coffee. Maybe the coffee is the white pill. Right?
It could be, right?
Yeah, well, that's like Dale Cooper. Dale Cooper from Twin Peaks. Every day, give yourself a present, right? Even if it's just a nice cup of fine black coffee or whatever the line is. Yeah, the little white pills. Black pills in my experience, tend to be large, and oftentimes they're kind of like black suppositories, and they're uncomfortable. But
and the thing about
white pills are so tiny that you don't always see them. They're small, but if you take enough white pills every day, you can get through. This is what I found. So, but yeah, sorry.
So, no, you're good. You're good. So basically, like you see with a baby, a structure is being created, right? And it's sort of being created like out of nothing a little bit. It's not quite, right? It's not total ex nihilo. But if
the form is out of nothing.
It really is,
maybe
right?
Not the substance, but the form, the idea of that as an individual human.
And if you're expecting like a time situation to happen, like if you are really gunning for entropy to be the forward flow of time is entropy, right?
Yeah.
Then a baby, a structured object being creative, and again, this very deep point, it's very important. It actually does tie in with the localism and all this stuff. The baby is an object going reverse in time. If we define going backwards in time as becoming more orderly, then we recognize that the left and the right are actually in a time war where the left is they're trying to flow with entropy and the right is trying to flow against entropy by making and maintaining orderly things. And again, science isn't saying what they mean by entropy, but I'm just like, the metaphor still stands though,
Yes.
that if chaos is your forward direction, then going opposite of chaos is the backwards direction. So the people who are society being in the current status quo of orderly in certain respects, the only way off of that point of order is to go in any chaotic direction to try to just deconstruct and reform or maybe just totally deconstruct forever, right? And queer. So you have the deconstruct and reform, which are the conservative leftists, or you have deconstruct and queer, which are the cult of Cthulhu leftists. You see what I mean? Because they are trying to get us to a point of pure entropy, because to queer something is to mix the categories together and inextricably mix the categories together. It's sort of, it's to blend everything up and to chop it into smaller and smaller beats until you get like a sort of meat paste, right? Yep. So the left, I
will just say, Elliott, keep going.
Oh, go ahead.
Go
ahead.
This is great. Yep. If this is the last episode that we ever do, it's a great time, everyone. Thank you all. Hopefully we'll see you again. Keep going. Yeah.
yes, right.
This
like,
rant is epic, but keep going. But if this was the last time, fare thee well. Yeah, keep going, Elliott.
Yeah. So essentially the left wins, so the right wins on the local scale, because homeostasis is only possible on a small scale. Once the scale gets too big, it is impossible for a corporeal body to maintain homeostasis. The largest homeostasis systems we have are things like Earth. Right? I don't know if there's an example of things that have homeostasis larger than Earth, and Earth is very small, right? So that's one thing. And the other thing is like, then the next largest thing other than Earth are like ecosystems, and then you have animals, right? And other creatures, right? So the right can only win on the small scale, on a localized scale, right? So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Cosmically speaking, and land is very purposeful about this. There's this deep occult notion of the left and the right, the sinister and the dexter, right? The sinister side, the left side, is the pillar of severity, which is also the pillar of womanliness, right? Of the eternal mother, right? And the right hand path is the pillar of light, the pillar of mercy, and it's the pillar of the sky father, right? Of the sort of cosmic father figure, right? And this sounds like totally out there, but Land actually is talking in these explicit terms. It's very important for the Cthulhu point too, right? So it's not totally crazy. So essentially, the left will win eventually in material terms. Period. End of story. By the way, the path of severity is material. The path of right is structure, is form, right? So you have substance and form, and this is why the left plays with form so much, because they don't care. They don't have the substance to begin with, right? Yeah. This is why they can't define what a woman is, right? So that being said.
Again, everyone, it's been great. Keep going, Elliott. This is the last.
Yeah, I know,
one.
Right?
It's been great. Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's hopefully it's not. Goodness Lord,
but
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah. Hopefully not. But regardless, basically we're getting to the point is Yarvin says the Cthulhu always swims left. Why? Because left is the order of entropy. Left is the order of is the direction of madness. It's the direction of chaos. So there you go. that is what Yarvin is saying.
Well, yeah, and we've talked a bit about that before, but yeah, no, thank you. That was yeah, no, I wanted to just hear how you tied land into it. And I say that too as somebody who's very curious about land. Are you land curious? I am land curious. I have not yet had time to read Land, and everything I've been told is make sure you squirrel away some time to actually read him, because it is not particularly easy to read. So you have made me even more land curious.
Well, so also
yeah.
it's if you're a Yarvin simp, just know that it was Yarvin and Nick Land who coined the Dark Enlightenment.
Yeah.
So put that, think about that for a second. And that's because I'd already.
You mean it wasn't Sam Harris?
Quite accessible.
You mean it wasn't Sam Harris? You mean
like,
it wasn't
Sam
Brett
Harris?
Weinstein?
You know what, man? While we're busy, well, anyway, regardless, it's a little bit too edgy for YouTube. but man, I get so triggered by. Well, the thing is that I think that I actually kind of, in some ways, sort of agree with sometimes what Harris is saying, because the atheists will say, "Oh, there's no." Well, some of the atheists, because he's trying to refute the is-ought distinction, right? He is like, no, there is at least one ought that comes from an is, and everybody's like, no, that's immoral, blah blah blah. And really, like, I don't think he's extreme enough in the way that he's debating, because again, it's sort of like a Hoppian argumentation ethics, where it's like, no, dude, like, you actually are, everybody who argues acts on one ought, right, which is the I must exist right now, right? Otherwise, so that is an is, right, that very much implies the ought, right? Like, you know what I mean? And or the ought implies the is, right? And they are inextricably linked, because you could not be without the ought, right? And the ought would not exist if you did not be, right? And that's another example of sort of what Land is talking about with like hyperstition and all these things, right? Is that so regardless, sorry, that's time, because that's kind of
good. That's good. And I think that sort of nicely sort of ties it up right there. You kind of did most of a conclusion right there. So thank you.
Nailed it.
Hashtag
homeostasis.
Homeostasis reached, at least until the next intrusion of chaos. And then we'll have to get up in the morning and stand with our shoulders back and make our beds and go on about creating order in a chaotic world.
Yeah, that rant, by the way, reads very similar. If you find that rant satisfying, you're gonna love Lovecraft, because that's very much the
that's mild compared to what Lovecraft has. So yeah,
exactly.
Elliott still retains his sanity, and no tentacle monsters have eaten him, as far as we know. So
well, because I'm not an artist, the artists go insane, and the scientists just go a little bit uneasy.
Or go evil. So we will not let that happen to you. We will not let you fall prey to the darkness.
Oh man, I'm ahead of it.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I'll Elliott, do you have anything new to share with us? New things, or are we still sort of working on stuff? It's okay. I just
no, it's the same.
Bump your stuff if you got it. Like
no, it's basically the same. It's the same website. There's still nothing there. My bad, everybody. I keep forgetting. At some point, I'll put stuff there. Right now, the important research that I was doing this evening was trying to find which grilled cheese bread is the best, and does Swiss cheese work for grilled cheese? But anyway, that's a different topic.
Culinary tips, yes. Culinary tips. Well, as somebody who's a great admirer of Martha Stewart, I think I can also agree and say it's a good thing. Cool. Well, yeah, I'll people who I sometimes write for carpeforum.com. It's been kind of an insane semester. I'm working on a thing right now. Probably going to turn Elliott, our Peace in the Feud episode, into kind of a distill it down and
nice.
and put that up there. Yeah. So, and I also have some more funky semiotic-y kind of things. I'd like to kind of, I know this channel has a lot of sort of hyper theoretical stuff like we're talking about right now, as well as sort of linguistic language-based stuff, and I kind of want to start marrying the two of those together, because there's so many connections between the two. So yeah, future plans and that will be coming out hopefully sometime this fall. So
absolutely, and to really, really understand, I think, a lot of the threads of current philosophy, you do have to have a foot in the hyper theoretical and a foot in literary, because they essentially, if you don't, you can't speak quickly enough about the topics, right? You
Yep.
see what I mean? So unless you get the references in both, it just takes way too long. So
The
basically,
hyper real
folks like
is exhausting,
Land,
but it's what it is.
it really is.
It's
You're
what
stuck
it
with
is. Yeah.
It
Cool.
is what it is, indeed.
It is what it is. Well, I'll leave everyone with that. Have a great weekend, everyone. And yeah, like, comment, subscribe, all the things. Follow us in our places. I'll list below if you're interested. You don't have to. If you want to get more takes like this. And yeah, until next time, everyone, take it easy. See ya.